finishing today the Maamar of the Alter Rebbe of that it's not good for man to be alone. Loi toiv he'asa adam levadai, ese loi ezer kenegdai. And we are up to 6 lines from the bottom. Okay? And we're basically wrapping up. We're wrapping up the idea of what we're speaking about. The Alter Rebbe is going to bring our Chayzer in again. What I was thinking that we're going to do, we'll read till the end, and then what I'm going to do is we're going to start from the beginning, not actually inside, but I'll just go over very generally so we can remember, because we've been doing this for a while. When did we start? 2 weeks ago around? So, things can get lost in your head in terms of the flow. So we'll just go over it quickly in terms of what comes after the next so we can get the idea. Shoshi asked me last night an interesting question.
Yes, she's not here.
I miss you, Shoshi. Because she said she was learning a Maamar with somebody and that it wasn't feeling very practical. And it's interesting because she was learning Mayim Rabbim, which is one of the most practical ones of the Alter Rebbe. But it's interesting that to remember that when we learn Chassidus on our own and we open up a Maamar, and specifically a Maamar, let's say, of the Alter Rebbe, or not of our Rebbe, who's talking to our generation specifically, that you're not always going to read it and then, have the message for your day to live by, if that makes sense. And that's unique in terms of the Maimarim versus Sichas. Sichas are much more it depends which Sicha as well, but the Rebbe would always finish his Sichas off with a Hayra, with an instruction, a practical way you can apply this lesson to your Avodas Hashem. When it comes to Maimarim, we have to figure that out for ourselves, or we don't, or we can learn. And we can get warmed up by the heat of the Chassidus and excited by even the ideas, that we're speaking about ideas of Hashem. And that warmth, that excitement, that connection that we feel to the learning, to the fact that we're learning about Hashem, can hopefully help fuel the rest of our day. But not always, and especially, so I mentioned in our introduction that there's Haskalah versus Avodah Maimarim. Do you remember this? Avodah Maimarim are like how to serve Hashem better, right? Practical. And then the Haskalah Maimarim are how did we get to these conclusions? How does Chabad Hasidus get to these conclusions? What's the background? What's the process? This Maamar that we're learning is more of what we would call a Haskalah Maamar. Okay? It's like the process of how we got to the conclusions that we got to. How the Alter Rebbe even got to the conclusions he got to in the Tanya when he speaks about Klipas Noiga. Where does it come from? What's the process? Well, this one of the Maimarim were there to explain that. Kind of almost like the behind the scenes and the philosophy of Chassidus. So I think that's just an important kind of caveat. The previous Maamar that we learned was more of an Avodah Maamar, actually, when we spoke about the Brisa versus the Mishnah, and we left with a message of how to learn Torah better, how to approach it. Here we're learning ideas, okay? So we're not going to end off, it's not going to end off in that way, but everyone can take what they learn for themselves from that. I just thought it was a good point that she brought up, and so just to put it out there. Okay, so we're in the middle of a conversation, basically. We're in the middle of a paragraph where we were speaking about what was Adam Harishon's Avaida if Klipas Noiga did not exist before the sin. And we said the fact that he lived in the physical world meant that he was at the back end of a lot of tzimtzumim, a lot of contraction. The world had gone through many parsas, many curtains. Hashem's light had gone through many parsas. And so his job was to do mitzvahs. And as a result of him doing mitzvahs, to elevate the world back up to its source, to the light as it is before the parsa. Okay? So Adam had work to do, but his work involved doing mitzvahs and just only focusing on the positive and the spiritual and the holy, and the rest will take care of itself. But as a result of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, now we have Klipas Noiga, and our job, our Avaida, is much more involved with the world, because the light has become Kalula mitoivara, included, made up of good and bad, and we need to involve ourselves with all of the physical things around us that are mutar, that are permissible, in a way that is able to elevate it up. Okay, so that again, that's the middle of the conversation where we are. Again, 6 lines from the bottom. The word ki. We're going to finish reading inside now. Then we'll wrap it up and we'll do a summary. Okay, and then we'll see how much time we have for you to kislev. So. Ki Klipas Noiga, Kuf Nun is Klipas Noiga. Sorry, this is where we walked. Good, okay. Ki Klipas Noiga, Hi Klula, Mem Tov Vav Reish. Does anyone know what that is? I always used to have like an obsession with figuring out Rosh Tevos. I don't know why. And I would get very upset when the teacher would say it before. But anyway, it's probably just me. Mem Tov Vav Resh is Mitov Vara. Right, correct. So Ki Klippas Noiga Hi Klula Mitov Vara. Klippas Noiga is made up of good and bad in one thing. V'hu Chayas Kol Dvarim Hamutarim. And this Klippas Noiga is the life of all that which is permissible. Not that which is necessarily specifically a mitzvah, but that which is permissible. Etc. Shenikra heter. Anything that's considered heter means permissible. Mutar. Remember what the word mutar means?
Permitted.
Permitted. And matir asurim we say every morning?
Open.
Untied. Right? That which is permitted is untied. Okay, what does that mean? It's untied. It's not bound down into klipa in a way that we're not able to extract it. It's untied. It's loose. Okay? She'ena asur. It's not asur. It's not forbidden. And what does asur mean? Tie down, v'kasher, and tie down, b'dei hachitzonim, in the hands of the outside forces. And therefore, v'yuchol lahaloi satov, we are able to elevate the good, v'bechinas ar chayzer, and then, as a result of that, create this level called ar chayzer, the light that bounces back, that rebounding light, that light that we extract from the darkness, which is a much more powerful light than the light that comes to us directly from the top down. And with all of this, Yuvan, we will now understand Masha Aimrim Babirkas Chatanim. What we say at a chasana. There are blessings that we say at a chuppah. There are 7 blessings that we say. We have the first one and the last one. So Babirkas Samach to Samach, Mesamech Chasan Vakala. The first one is Samach to Samach Rea Mahuvim. And it ends with Mesamech Chasan Vakala. So Samach to Samach, we will rejoice. Mesamech with the joy, Chatan Vakala, of the Chasan, of the groom. Good morning, Vakala, and the bride. Or Bebracha Achrayna. And then the final blessing of the 7, which is Asher Bara Sasan V'Simcha Chasan Vakala, Nisa V'Chedva, Ava, Achva, Shalom V'Reus, right? And then it ends, Asher Bara, Mesameach Chasan Im Hakala. Then you say the Bracha, Baruch Hashem Mesameach Chasan Im Hakala. So what's the difference between the first one, how we say it, how we end the bracha, and the last one?
First one is and then with.
Right, the first one is and the second one is with. The first bracha is the chasan and the kala, which puts the chasan before the kala, chasan and then the kala, right? And then the end, we end off with chasan im hakala, the chasan with the kala. And that represents the, I guess you can all, in a physical level, that represents the journey that the chassan and kala go on, where at the beginning there's this relationship where the husband gives to the wife. Physically, he gives, like, the not the only goal of marriage, but to have a Jewish home and to have children. The process is that the husband gives to the wife and she receives, right? So chassan and the kala, seemingly first the chassan. But then we have that the kala, the wife, the woman, creates something from that which she has received that could not have existed, that could not have been created without her. And that's a new child, a new creation into the world. So that's the process of it, starting with chasan and kala and then ending with chasan im hakala, where the chasan is with his kala. He's dependent on his kala, on the wife. That's in the physical sense. In the spiritual sense, we have the chasan and we have the kala. The chasan, the male, represents the name of Havaya, that just gives, hashpa, the mashpia. Right? Have you heard that the male is compared to the mashpia, the giver? The female is the receiver. So the male, the chasan, represents the name of Havaya, which just gives. And the female, the bride, represents the name of Elokim, which receives that light and blocks it and then channels it, right? In a more limited way. And the idea is that when that happens, when she channels it, when the light of Hashem is channeled, we create an Or Chayzer. Now Im Hakala, Havaya and Elokim are working together to create something brand new that could not have worked that could not have existed without them working together and without that blockage. Do you get the Marshal Nimshal? Chasan Kala, Elokim and Havaya? V'zeh Chasan v'Kala. Sorry, I skipped. Mesamech Chasan v'bracha achrayna she'asher bara amrim mesamech Chasan im hakala. Ki hakala hi bechinas malchus. Because the kala, the bride, the feminine, represents malchus, which is the lowest sephira. And remember we said that in Or Yashar, malchus is the lowest sephira. And it receives from what we would call the 6 emotional spheres, which is represented by the male energy. gives and Malchus then receives it. But then once Malchus receives it, when we extract the light as a result of that, it bounces back from Malchus and gives back to everything, right? So the Kala is Malchus. Malchus, Elokim, Shechina, right? All of those would be interchangeable in this context. Tchila, first, in the process of Malchus, he makabeles ha'or ma'chasan. She receives the light from the chasan, from the groom. And that's why, actually, does anyone know, chatan comes from the word, if you mix it around, I don't exactly know how this works. It's explained in Chassidus, I guess with interchangeable letters. It's called chatan is tachat. Has anyone heard this idea?
It's called what? Tachat.
Nachat.
Yeah.
Which means to land. To lower yourself, actually. Chatan comes from the word to lower, because he has to, first there's like a lowering that the chassan has to do to meet his kala. Okay, and again, not like in like the physical sense of like that men are better than women, right? But just in the process of being able to meet, he has to lower himself, and then so that they're on the same level, so that they can be a match, so that she can receive. But once that has been done, she actually gives back in a way that is more powerful than the original giving. Right? And then the mashal for that would be like children, right? So it doesn't speak about it here, but you see that he gives, and she's dependent on him to give the seed. And then she creates something, or they create something together, but she creates something much more powerful than the original giving. Right? And that's like the idea that Hashem gives in the name of the light of Havai, which is a very powerful light, but it's a direct light. And then when we take that light, when Elokim takes that light, blocks it, it becomes consumed into the concealment, and we have this thing called klipas noiga, and then we extract the light from there. The light that we extract is much, much more powerful. It's like a new birth. That's the process of Ar Chayzer. And that's only enabled because of this concept called klipas noiga. And so because of the nature, and because of Elokim, because of that blockage. So it is brought that nachat, and it's like tachat, the word like to go down. Chatan actually literally means to lower. And it's spoken about in my Maram of the Eishes Chayil, which speaks about this process. Not the Eishes Chayil, of L'cha Daidi. Sorry. There was a Maamar that the Friedrich Rebbe gave at the Rebbe at his wedding, and the Friedrich Rebbe, I think, at the Rebbe's wedding. I'm trying to remember, the L'cha Daidi Maamar. There's two. There's the Friedrich Rebbe's one and the Rebbe's one. And they speak about this idea of like the giving and the receiving, and the male and the female and the chassan and the kala. Okay, so Tchila hi mikabeles ha'or ma'chasan. First, Malchus receives from the chassan, from the 6 emotional sephiros, chesed, gevurah, tiferes, netzach, chayt, yesod. Shenimshach me'alma de duchra, which is drawn down from the duchra, literally means dechura, means male, is drawn down from the male world, but alma de nukva into the female world. That from the giver to the receiver. V'zeo chasan v'kala. That's the process of what we would call Ar Yashar, direct light, that the chasan gives to the kala, that the sephiros give to Malchus. Malchus is at the end, at the bottom, it lowers itself, and then Malchus receives it. Amnam achar kach, but however, afterwards, hu mesameach chasan im hakala. We have the joy of the groom with his bride. She'al yadei hakala, that through the bride, hu mesameach es hachasan. That's what gives joy to the chasan. That through the fact that the chasan gave to the bride, through the fact that the sephiros gave to Malchus, now they can actually get back from Malchus. The light that comes back as a result of the concealment, the light that's extracted from the darkness, then gives back to all of the sephiros. And this is what we've been discussing throughout this Maamar of Ar Chayzer. Now Malchus literally becomes a helper. She, the bride, literally becomes to him a helper, a partner in creation, in building their family and in the creation of their children. But Tosefet Ar, and she adds light, connected from the fact that she is opposing him. That's why we say that she becomes ateret. Eshet Chayil ateret ba'ala. What's ateret? Atara leba'ala, a crown. So then she becomes a crown to her husband. It starts off by her receiving, and then she actually becomes the crown, because that which she gives back after receiving, that which she gives back is much more powerful, raises up her husband with her. And Elokim actually raises up Havaya, because again, Havaya cannot fulfill its purpose without Elokim. The purpose of creation, which is that we should feel separate from Hashem and then come close to Him. Okay. Any questions on what we just read? Because we're going to do now a quick kind of summary of the whole thing. But on what we just spoke about, any questions or comments? Good. Okay. So now let's go to the beginning. We're going to do this just quickly, okay? Just so we can remember where we started, where we ended, what the flow of the Maamar looked like, okay? So we started off with what we call the Divrei HaMatchil, the opening verse, Loi Taiv Heyes Ha'adam Levadai Ese Loi Ezer Kenegdo from Bereishit. It's not good for man to be alone. I will make for him a helper against him. Okay? And so we had the question, why is it not good for man to be alone? What do we mean by a helper against him, according to Chassidus? Then we went straight into the biur, the explanation, which is based on a pasuk from Tehillim, Ki Shemesh Omagen Havaya Elokim, that the sun and its shield are a mashal, are an analogy for the two names of Hashem, Havaya, representing the sun, and Elokim, representing the shield, the block for the sun. Then we defined each one. We spoke about Havaya, we spoke about Elokim, inside and outside. Outside, we gave 4 definitions for each one. Havaya being Giloi, oh gosh, I now see how, I'm not sure I remember. Help me out here. Bli Gvul, Giloi, Achdus, Pshittus, and Dveikus. Dveikus and Achdus Pshittus, right? And then we said Elokim is the opposite of that, right? It's limited, it's separate, it blocks that which it's given, it hides it, and it gives distinct depending on who is receiving it, right? I might have missed something there. But we defined outside Elokim and Havaya, and inside, the Alter Rebbe here in the first paragraph teaches us that the name of Havaya is from Lehitavot, from Hisavos, bringing into being. It's the light that Hashem uses to bring the world into being. It's the life force energy of the world. And it's a very, very powerful light of Hashem that if it would shine alone, would cause all creation. It would enable creation to exist, but in a way of what we called bittul b'metzias, that it did not feel its own existence, which would not allow the purpose of creation to be fulfilled. What's the name of Elokim? Elokim is Gematria Hateva, nature. We called it also the Shekhinah, Hashem, as he limits himself so he can rest among the world in a way that he doesn't overwhelm the world with his presence. And the Elokim comes to block the light of Havaya, to filter it in the process what we called Tzimtzum, where the Pnimius gets left behind, the Chitzonius comes through. The light that comes is categorically different from the light that went through in the beginning after it goes through the process of Elokim. And we said that Elokim is the way that Hashem becomes a ruler and a king over the world, because a king needs to have people. Ein melech b'lo am. And that's enabled by Elokim coming and limiting the light, right? That was the first paragraph. Questions, comments on the first paragraph? Okay. Then we spoke about Golus HaShechina. So we said that there's the function and there's the purpose for Havaya and for Elokim. The function of Elokim is to block the light of Havaya and to filter it and to limit it. The purpose of Elokim is to enable the creation of the world in a way that we feel separate so that we can then come close to Hashem. When the function is working, when Elokim is blocking the light of Havaya, but the purpose is not being fulfilled, it's just blocking, and we're not actually doing any elevating. And the example that was brought was the Ayin Sarim, the 70 ministers of the non-Jewish nations who live in such a world of concealment that they lose sight of the fact that there is Hashem to pursue and to look for. That is called Golus HaShechina, where the function of Elokim is working, the concealment is there, the purpose, however, is not being fulfilled. Right? And that is, as the Alter Rebbe ends, that's the opposite of the kavanah, of the intention of the creation, which is that we should have bittul, and more bittul hayesh, right? That we should have an ego, that we should feel separate, but that we should then turn towards Hashem from that place. Then, in paragraph number 3, we spoke about the mashal for our chayzer. So first we had a mashal for our chayzer, then we had the nimshal. The mashal was, does anyone remember what the mashal was? A mirror. Right. We said that a mirror is made up of glass and a thin silver covering on top. And that the light will then bounce off of that silver covering to allow you to see yourself and to allow it to see what's behind you. Okay? And that is only enabled because there's actually something blocking the light from going directly through. That allows you to see something brand new that you couldn't have seen otherwise. That was the mashal. The nimshal is the idea of our chayzer. That the light of Havaya is called shining without anything kind of blocking it, is what we would call our yashar. It's that direct light, like the sun shining through a glass window. Nothing blocking it, just coming straight through, being just channeled. And then we have Havaya as it works together with Elokim, which creates what we call an Or Chayzer. That when Hashem's life force energy is limited and channeled in a way that we can feel separate, we can then come close to Hashem, reveal the light of Hashem from nature, from the world, and when we do that, we create a bounce back effect where Malchus becomes the giver, Keser becomes the receiver. The whole thing is flipped upside down because from Malchus we actually are able to extract this brand new light that comes from that new momentum, from hitting the force, the blockage, and that it's able to bounce back. And we spoke about the fact that the soul descends into the world. The soul descends into the body. The body is the blockage. It's a container, it's a limiter, and it's a block. It blocks the soul. In order that then we can fulfill the purpose of the soul in this world, and it can then get what we call an aliyah, yorida l'tzorech aliyah, a descent for the purpose of an ascent. Okay, then in the middle of this big paragraph, after the nimshal, we went back to explain the verse. What does it mean? It's not good for a man to be alone. I'll make him a helper against him. We said that Adam, in this context, we're not talking about Adam hatachton, the physical man called Adam. We're talking about Adam ha'elyon. Hashem, as he shines his lights into the world of Atzilus through the Sephiros, is called Adam ha'elyon. Hashem, as he expresses himself into the spiritual worlds. And that it's not good for this light of Hashem to be alone, for this expression of Hashem to be alone, for Havaya to exist without anything channeling, limiting, blocking it. Because then, if it would be alone, we would all exist in a state of Bittul HaMetzias. We would not feel separate. We would not be able to fulfill the purpose for creation. The Ezer Kenegdoi is the name of Elokim. It's not good for Havaya to shine alone. It can't fulfill the purpose of creation. I will introduce the name of Elokim, which will then block the light of Havaya, channel it, limit it to the point that there is creation as we know it that feels separate from Hashem. And from that place, we can actually fulfill the purpose of creation. So it's a helper against him. It helps Havaya fulfill her purpose by being against Havaya, by blocking Havaya. And then we said about Tzchok Asali Elokim. We said that Yitzchak got his name Tzchok Asali Elokim, that the true pleasure and joy up above for Hashem comes from the name of Elokim, comes from the fact that we live in a concealed world, and from that concealment we seek out Hashem and we find him. Okay? And then we brought mashals about that, about the indirect light. We spoke about the Eishes Chayil, we spoke about the sun and the moon, that the woman and the moon have indirect light, but that's actually more powerful and closer to the purpose. Right? Then, this is going to be much more familiar, so we'll go through this very quickly. We spoke about it yesterday and today, and also on Wednesday, page 3, we spoke about Adam Harishon. And we said that after Adam Harishon ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Hashem made him clothing of leather. And that those clothing of leather spiritually represent this concept called Klippas Noiga. That there's physical, the Alter Rebbe uses the term everything under the sun. That all that which is physical in this world that's not explicitly asur is what we would call Klippas Noiga. It's like this leather that is there, it's concealing Hashem. We don't see the truth of Hashem there, but there's Noiga, there's light there that we then need to reveal. We spoke about what the job of Adam looked like before the sin and after the sin. He just needed to do mitzvahs before, and the klipa would die on its own. Then he needed to do mitzvahs and stay away from the Gimel Klippas HaTmeis and elevate the Klippas Noiga, involve himself in the physical world. We used the mashal of two things, of clothing, taking leather, taking animal skin, turning it into leather, turning it into shoes, making it functional, taking the physical around that conceals Hashem and revealing the truth that it too has a purpose, which is to reveal the truth of Hashem. And we spoke about the mashal, not inside but outside of the farming, the curse that Adam got, that now he's going to have to, in order to eat fruit, in order to do mitzvahs, he also has to burn up all of the thorns, the Gimel Klippas HaTmeis, and repurpose the leaves and the dead wood, etc. That's the Klippas Noiga. Okay, and we said that Hashem, Elokim, made Kas Nasar, using both names of Hashem, that made the light of Klippas Noiga, which was created as a result of Adam and Chava eating from the tree. Okay, we spoke about Chanoich, that he would make shoes, etc. That's what we learned yesterday. And today, yesterday we started, and today we spoke about the parsas. We said, what would Adam Harishon have done if he had not sinned, would there still be this concept of Ar Chayzer? The answer is yes, but much less powerful. The concealment was less. He was at the bottom of the parsa. We used the example of the physical body, that we too have a parsa separating the upper and the lower, the more important from the less important. And so too, Adam had a job because his world existed after many parsas to elevate the world. But now that job has been prolonged and made more difficult by the fact that now the good and bad is kind of in one thing. Okay, and then we ended with what we just ended about Eshes Chayil, about the blessing of the Chassan and Kala at their wedding, that we start off with the Chassan and the Kala, where we have that Or Yashar, that giving and the receiving, and we end off with the Or Chayzer, where when you work together and you have an Ezer Connector, when the wife is an Ezer Connector with her husband, the light that's created as a result of that is more powerful than the light that she receives from her husband when he is working alone. Okay, you got it? Chazak, chazak. So we learned another whole Maamar inside by the Alter Rebbe. Beautiful. And again, this is what we would call a Haskalah Maamar, not an Avodah Maamar. You see, there's not like, in terms of like, okay, takeaway now. This is how you serve Hashem. But it's introducing us to ideas that we can then be able to, let's say, learn Tanya and learn the Avodah Maamar better. Now we know what Klipas Noiga is. We know what our role is in this physical world. We know, and I mentioned this, and this is important because we're getting to Yotes Kislev, which is involved in the whole idea of the opposition of Chassidus and overcoming that opposition. That one of the oppositions to Chassidus was this idea of Klipas Noiga. Was this idea that everything in the world has an opportunity to be elevated. That there isn't some gray area in between where you can just be, where you can just exist. That the whole purpose is to elevate everything. And that even that which we're not elevating, that we're staying away from, is being elevated by us staying away from it. So hopefully we can take from that. Any questions, comments, something that wasn't clear from the Maamar? You're good? Okay, amazing. And just a reminder, after every 3 Maamar we learn, we're going to do a review. So we're going to learn another. How many weeks is the winter program? Is it 3 weeks? Okay, so we're going to learn 1 to 2 Maamarim in the winter program. We'll have to see.
But the winter program girls didn't learn the...
Right, and then once the winter program is over, whoever's still here, Shem, hopefully you'll all just decide to stay. They don't like goodbyes. Then we're going to do a review, okay? So just keep that in mind so we can remember also.
Like this speaking or like writing, like a test?
Quiz? I don't want to call it a test because that's triggering for some people. But just a review and some questions so I can also see what was understood and what, how I can do better. Okay, amazing. So now we have 20 minutes. So we'll talk about Yotes Kislev. So first of all, I wanted to hear from you guys. Who's familiar? Raise your hand if you're familiar with the story of Yotes Kislev. Tali? Okay.
You never know.
Kind of. Okay, there's always more to learn. I'm learning every year more details. Okay, and if you're not familiar at all, raise your hand.
I know a little bit, but I don't know.
A little bit?
They kept saying Yotes Kislev. I know,
Yeah.
a rabbi is involved, but that's about it.
Okay. Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate it.
We're going to Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson on Thursday.
I'm so excited.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Is that like
At the
at
Great
Great Synagogue.
the Great Synagogue? He's doing a talk?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
also someone else, who did they say?
Yeah, they told us on Shabbos they sang
Moshe,
I don't remember his name.
with a W. Whatever.
Okay, beautiful. Do you know what he's talking about?
Yotes
Yotes Kislev.
He's the topic
Okay.
on the post that
He's having like a Farbregan kind of style, not like a speech.
For bringing around a big table?
No, like
No.
his Farbregans. Like he has music, then he talks, and there's music again, and then he talks again.
I was
And
there
there's
last year.
Sounds like a vibe. Okay,
Very
maybe
funny.
It
I'll go.
goes on for like 5 hours.
I
It's
didn't
not
know
like
they
one
exist.
speech.
5
Wow.
hours?
She's not impressed.
But
Yeah?
did you
No,
want
I
to
got
Oh,
because my parents always
No,
know
it's
so I'm
not.
going over.
That sounds really nice.
would've
I think
I'll
it is
go.
the same.
It's the same thing. We're gonna be
I don't know.
the
Rivka
same
said if
shul.
you want to go.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to also just do a recap because Yotes Kislev comes once a year, and by the time it comes again, you forget, what happened from last year. And so we'll do a general recap, and I'll just share some stories, maybe some interesting things I just came across recently. So, okay, so Yotes Kislev is what we call. It's called Yotes Kislev because it's the 19th of Kislev. Again, we're not original in Chabad with naming things. Yotes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev. It's actually Yotes/Kof Kislev, and we'll talk about that, the 19th and the 20th of Kislev. Does anyone know what happened on the 19th of Kislev before the Alter Rebbe was released from prison?
Maggid of Mezrich
The Maggid of Mezrich.
returned his soul to his maker.
That's right, he passed away.
It was a really nice way to say it.
Very nice way to say it.
How to say it. He passed away. I was like, okay, how to say it?
Yes, that's right. So yes, his neshama went up to Hashem, and right before he actually passed away, he told the Alter Rebbe that this is our Yom Tov. Even though nothing had happened yet to the Alter Rebbe, that the 19th of Kislev is our Yom Tov. The Maggid HaMezrich was the Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe.
How did he tell him? Wasn't he in jail?
The Alter Rebbe was in jail like 36 years after the passing of the Maggid of Mezrich. But before the Maggid of Mezrich passed away, he said that the 19th of Kislev is our Yom Tov.
Oh, you're just saying the same day, but not
Same
the same
day.
actual day.
Not the-
Right, it's not the same actual day in terms of the year, but the same date on the calendar. Yeah. So, the truth, there were two arrests. The Alter Rebbe was arrested twice. He was arrested in 1798. And again, I think this is important to note, I mentioned this before, that the Gaon Mivilna passed away in 1797, a year before, which can't be a coincidence, right? The opposition to Chabad, like the political opposition we spoke about, the ideological versus political, at this point it became incredibly just political, ramped up after the Vilna Gaon passed away, to the point that the Alter Rebbe was arrested in 1798 and then again in 1800. And I'm still trying to make sense of which story, which thing happened when. First arrest, the second arrest. The first arrest looked much more severe. He was taken away in a black wagon, which was for political prisoners who were accused of treason against the state, against the Tsar of Russia. And for quite a few days, the Hasidim didn't even know if the Alter Rebbe was alive. And then they got a hold, there's whole stories with that, but I'm just going to give the general and then we'll see how many details we can get into. He was there for 54 days and he was released to a chassid's house, Mordechai Lepper's house, which was a 2-story house. On the bottom floor lived somebody who was, we call him Misnagid, we know his name, Nutta something. He was a big opposer of Chassidus, and on the top floor was Mordechai Lepler, so the chassid who they were supposed to send the Alter Rebbe to when he was released, and he was sent, accidentally dropped off at the bottom floor, the Misnagid's house, and he was there for 3 hours. First he let him in, Shalom Aleichem, and then he started questioning the Alter Rebbe to the point like yelling at him, and you know, there were a lot of questions that the Misnagdim had, so he started off by asking questions and then just challenging more and more and more. Eventually the Chassidim were waiting for the Alter Rebbe to come. Then they went downstairs, they heard yelling. So they knocked on the door, said, open the door. He didn't open the door, so they knocked the door down. Found the Alter Rebbe sitting like with a tea on the table with his hands like this in his head. Okay, so they took the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said they wanted to teach this guy a lesson, but the Alter Rebbe said, no, as my Chassidim, my command you not to touch him. There was one guy there who wasn't his Chassid. He said, I'm not your Chassid, so he took care of him. But anyway, I just learned that detail this year, so it was interesting. And he was then taken. So that's where the Chof Kislev comes in, because in those 3 hours it had become evening already. The 9th of Kislev, when he was released, turned into the 20th. And those 3 hours, the Alter Rebbe was quoted as saying, were more difficult than the whole 54 days that he spent in prison. It was very, very difficult. The whole opposition to Hasidim, we don't have a clue what that looked like today, because now we still, even as Chabad, will call some people misnagdim. It doesn't exist. The whole concept doesn't exist. The truth is that the whole like the decimation of that real fight came in the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, because the Hasidim and the Misnagdim got a common enemy during that time, which was the Haskalah movement and what we call today Reform. And so all of those things fell away because they had to preserve Yiddish, real Yiddishkeit. But we've spoken before about the opposition, and at the time of the Alter Rebbe, it had turned really... there were Hasidim who lost their lives, who were killed in certain places. There were cherems put on... when a Yid would become a Chassid from what we would call like more Litvish family, they would sit and tear their clothes and mourn the person as if he had died. There were things put out that because the Alter Rebbe introduced a new way of doing shechita, which was with a very, 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 very thin, very sharp knife. They said that you're not allowed to eat from the meat, from the shechita, which means that their food is treif. You can't eat in their homes. It was real. It was war. It had turned into war already in the time. It had started in the time of... The opposition started in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, but more ideologically, got worse in the time of the Maggid, and really, you could say, hit its peak in the time of the Alter Rebbe, and the peak would be, in that time where the Alter Rebbe was in prison, and I just learned in reading the Kotzi Debarim from the Frierdiker Rebbe in his Sichas, he relates that there were messengers who went, and I mentioned this, to go into town and say the Alter Rebbe was taken in a black wagon, which means he's being taken to his death, almost certainly. It's time to say Hallel and to have a soda, right? So it's hard for us to imagine, but this was the point that the Machlokes had come to. The first imprisonment was from a man named, now I'm not remembering his name, Baruch Ben Chaim or something like that. I have to find out. Someone had sent a libel to the government. Nobody to this day knows who this guy was. I have to remember his name. Something Chaim ben Baruch. I think that was his name. Chaim ben Baruch. Chaim the son of Baruch. You could check.
Yeah.
I think, and in Russia, your father's name became like your last name, so Baruchovich.
Yeah.
I think he was called like Chaim Baruchovich, something like that. Nobody knew who he was. In prison, in the interrogations, they asked the Alter Rebbe, "Do you know who this man is who like caused you to be here?" He was like, "I know a lot of Chaims. I know a lot of people. Ben Bar. I don't know. No, nobody knew who he was. So we don't know who it was.
Ben Chaim?
Is that what it says?
No, it's someone else from South Africa.
Oh, no. Yeah, you're not going to find him on Google because we don't know who he is to this day. We don't know. But somebody sent in two letters, two notes into not the government, the Tsar regime, whatever you want to call it, that basically said that the Alter was extorting money from his Hasidim and he was using that money to send to Palestine, to what was called
Ottoman Empire,
the Ottoman Empire, to the Turks who were...
It's not the Turks, please. It's like a whole... I know it's Ottomans, it's not the Turks.
It's not the Turks.
No.
It's
But it was the Turkish,
Very personal.
but it was the Turkish Empire.
No.
Turkey
It's
was a part of
Ottoman
Ottoman.
Ottoman Empire.
Turkish came in 1880.
Okay, so that's definitely later. Fine,
Please.
fine. This is the
Every time
1800s, the beginning. So the Ottoman
No, it's
Empire,
fine, it's
the
just-
Ottoman Empire, and they were both two empires, the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and they were rivals. And so this was serious. The first arrest that happened in 1798 was more serious in terms of that he was taken in as like someone, they didn't know who the Alter Rebbe was. They didn't know who they were dealing with. So he was taken in as a common prisoner, thrown into jail. Nobody knew where he was. The Hasidim had to they gathered money. They went to every single town where Hasidim were, and they said anything that you have that's valuable that you don't need. So like a becher you need, but like if your talis has a nice, bag, anything that's like not needed, so they gathered a lot of money for bribes just to find out what was going on. It took them many days. There's a lot of stories in between how they found out. They found out because basically they took the Alter Rebbe and they were trying to figure out who this guy is. They felt threatened by him. Who is this guy? What's going on? We have now the records of the interrogation, the original. They interrogated the Alter Rebbe and he said that he doesn't really know Russian, even though he did know Russian. He didn't know enough Russian. Can I write down my answers? There were like 24 questions, I think. And there was a translator, a chassid who was with him who would translate. But Russia still has in their archives the handwritten responses of the Alter Rebbe, which they have not given us, but they allowed us to take photos. So we have copies of all of the answers that they gave. They're trying to figure out what's his connection to Israel and what's this movement. And so the first arrest looked more serious, but it was actually less serious in terms of that. They were kind of just trying to figure out who he was. And once they figured out who the Alter Rebbe was, actually ministers from all over Russia and the Tsar himself came to visit the Alter Rebbe. So figure out who this guy was. And the famous story is with the Minister of Culture who came here, because the Alter Rebbe was known not only to know a lot of Jewish topics, but also astrology and all these kind of things. So he came to talk to him. And he came for many meetings because he was very impressed by the Alter Rebbe. There's a famous story with him that he asked, we just read this inside when we spoke about the story of Adam and Chava, that when Adam and Chava ate from the tree, Hashem said, Ayeka, where are you? So he came in to ask the Alter Rebbe. I'm just sharing a little bit now, okay? I hope that's okay. He came in to ask the Alter Rebbe, does Hashem not know where Adam is? How can you say that God doesn't know where someone is? God is everywhere. So at first the Alter Rebbe gave him Rashi's response, Rashi's explanation, which is that he didn't want to scare him. Adam, that just appearing. So he first said, where are you, And he said, no, I know Rashi's answer. I want to hear your answer. So first the Alter Rebbe asked him, do you believe in God? And he said, yes. Do you believe in Hashgacha Pratis? Do you believe that God is involved in the world all the time? He said, yes. And do you believe in the Torah and that the Torah is eternal? He said, yes. The Alter Rebbe was very impressed. He's a not Jewish guy, the high-up Russian official. He said, okay. He was impressed. So he said, fine, I'll give you an answer. So he said that the Torah is eternal and that God is asking every one of us, Ayeka, where are you? Where are you in your mission? And then he said, he's asking everyone that you've lived so and so many days and so many hours and so many years, so many days, so many hours, so many minutes. He said down to the minute how old this minister was, and he's asking you, Ayeka, where are you? Where are you in your fulfillment of your mission in this world? So he's very impressed, and he ended up he asked him, what can I do? And he ended up being the one to tell the Hasidim that the Alter Rebbe was alive, and ended up after 5 days, they tried force-feeding the Alter Rebbe. He refused because he wouldn't eat non-kosher. He ended up getting him food, like fruit compost from Mordechai Lepler, and in him transporting the food back and forth that he promised not to touch, they would put notes at the bottom. So the first note that the Alter Rebbe put was, because they didn't know who they were making food for, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So they knew the Alter Rebbe was alive, and then they said who. They wrote secret messages under the applesauce, basically, back and forth, literally. So this went on for 54 days. The Tsar himself, his name was, maybe you can help me out, Paul or Peter?
At this
Paul.
point, probably.
He was a king for 4 years.
Yeah, Paul.
He was Catherine the Great's son.
Peter died. Yeah.
He was Catherine the Great's son. He was king for 4 years, and in those
Really
4
bad
years,
one, actually.
the Alter Rebbe was in prison twice.
He did
Okay.
a horrible job.
Yeah, he was apparently really bad. His mom was German, right? Catherine the Great.
All
she
of
was
them are German, technically. British, yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. So he himself came as well to visit, and he didn't tell the Alter Rebbe who he was. And the Alter Rebbe got up. He said, "Why are you getting up?" He said, "Because you're the king. I have to stand up for a king." He said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because the Malach, right, we've been speaking about that. There's every leader has an angel." He said, "I see the angel came in with you, right?" And then he said, "Why are you up? It's the middle of the night," because they had taken him to Peter Paul Fortress and put him somewhere where you can't see whether it's light or dark or day or night. He said, "How do you know?" Because they did that to disorient the prisoners. He said, "No, it's not the nighttime, it's the afternoon." And he told him what time. The Alter Rebbe said what time it was. He said, "How do you know?" So he said, "Because I know when the angels say Baruch Hu, when the angels say Kadosh, 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 it's the day, and when they say Baruch Hu, it's the night." The Alter Rebbe knew down. There's stories also with his Hasidim that he would sometimes fix the clock. A clock in those days was a very big deal. And he would someone tried to fix once the Alter Rebbe's clock based on his brand new modern watch that he had gotten. The Alter Rebbe walked in and was like, "Who changed my clock?" No. I know according to the Partsufim Al-Yonim, he said, to the upper way that Hashem's light is shining, what time it is exactly. Anyway, so everyone was very impressed. They started to figure out who the Alter Rebbe was. And the more they figured that out, eventually, and with also a lot of the help of the Hasidim took on fasting. I just learned this year, because I tried to learn a little bit more about the story. There was a Chassid who died a few days before Yotes Kislev from starvation. He had been fasting, and he told the Chasidim, he said, "The Alter Rebbe is going to be released. And when he's released, you need to come and say L'chaim at my grave." This was a few days before Yotes Kislev. He passed away. And then right near Yotes Kislev, this Hasidim, he came to them in a dream and said, "You need to come to my grave and say L'chaim." Those who could take on fasting, everyone kind of took on 2 days a week to fast. Those who took on more, just would eat a little bit, I guess, at night. It was a very, very, very serious time. And again, for the first couple of days, almost a week, they didn't even know if the Alter Rebbe was alive. And then they didn't know if the Alter Rebbe would come out alive, because it was rare to come out of these situations alive. And he was released on the 19th of Kislev.
Why was he released?
So it was a combination of the Russians figuring out that this wasn't the case, right? And lobbying going on behind the scenes by Hasidim and bribes. They were doing everything that they possibly could as well, but they did interrogate the Alter Rebbe and realize who the Alter Rebbe was, and that he wasn't what this libel had sent him in for. The second time the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned was more serious. And we see that more like spiritually serious, because now the Misnagdim are the ones who put him in prison, led by somebody named Avigdor, who was the rabbi, I think, of Pinsk. It's called the Pinsk Rav, where they were basically telling them that telling the government there's this, who were very involved, it seems like, in everything. I guess Russia's a little bit still like that today, but saying that there's a new that there's these people, these Hasidim, that they're like a new Judaism, they're a new religion, and that they need to be stopped. So the questions and the interrogations were much more serious because they were with the help of the Misnagdim, and he was then in the second arrest treated with much more kavod, with much more respect, because now they knew who he was and they shouldn't mess with him. On the way back, I'm jumping around, I'm sorry, but on the way from his release, the officer who was charged with taking him, it was Erev Shabbos. And so it became closer and closer to Shabbos. And so the Alter Rebbe said, I want to stop here. And he said, you don't get to tell me what to do. And then the axe of the wheel broke. And so he fixed the axe of the wheel, they continued, and then the horse died. So he realized, okay. So they stopped on the side of the road in a place that we now know is called Nevel, where a lot of actually big Hasidim came from. And there's a tradition that there's a place in Nevel, it was this barren area, and then there was one place that was like an oasis with trees, and there was a tradition passed that was the place where the Alter Rebbe stayed for Shabbos. And then he continued on, and he got home on the 19th, and then it went into the 20th. The Alter Rebbe, when he was released, he wrote letters after his release. He sent to his colleagues, I guess we could call also big other Hasidim of the Magid. Baruch Mezhebush was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Levi Zrubaditcher, he sent letters like describing what he had been through and the nace and the miracle of his release, and he described there that he had been in the middle of the Tehillim of the day of the 19th of Kislev saying Pada b'shalom nafshi. He was at the verse that my soul will be released in peace, and the Alter Rebbe has a mimer on it, and the Mitzvah Rebbe also was saying Pada b'shalom nafshi, also has a mimer on it. So he described how this was a very big Yeshua and that it's a day for celebration, etc. So then the second arrest was also not just like trying to figure out who the Alter Rebbe was, that he said maybe a threat and treason, but also that trying to figure out what Chabad Hasidus was, and is Hasidus in general. The Alter Rebbe was the representative for all Hasidim and being arrested, which he was very excited about. The Alter Rebbe was very happy that he got to have the Mesiras Nefesh to be the representative for the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, who had brought down that they visited him in jail physically. He was very excited about that he got to, Baruch Mezhebush was a big opponent of Chabad Hasidus. He was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He always used to say, who do you think you are? I'm the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. So the Alter Rebbe said, so why did I sit in jail for your grandfather? You're his physical grandson and I'm his spiritual grandson. Mm-hmm. But the release, and especially the second time, signified that opposition that was going on physically, and everything as we've been discussing physically corresponds to something going on spiritually. That also the spiritual opposition to the spreading of Chabad Hasidus as the Alter Rebbe was doing it, that it had been given a stamp almost, that release. And so when we celebrate Yud Kislev, first of all, we're celebrating that the Alter Rebbe was released. And all of the Hasidus, which was abundantly more after he was released, that we have, and his life that was spared, that we got that. And in addition, that there was this stamp of approval that now you can spread the wellsprings of Hasidus, that spiritual and physical opposition was more spiritual, was over. That's what we're celebrating on Yud Kislev. We call it the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus. It's the day that Hasidus was born, where Hasidus, as we can live it, as we can learn it, as we can spread it, has gotten that seal and stamp of approval from Shamayim. And the Alter Rebbe knew that this was a spiritual thing because he had a way to escape as well. The Alter Rebbe had a way to escape. And there's stories behind that as well, why he didn't escape. And the story with Shmuel Munkus, he told him that, listen, if you're a Rebbe, then nothing's going to happen to you. And if you're not a Rebbe, then you deserve something to happen to you because you've been faking that you're a Rebbe. So it's not Pikuach Nefesh and you can go. But that's what we're celebrating. We're celebrating Hasidus. And that the Alter Rebbe was able to lead to spread Hasidus in the way that he was, so that we can live it today in the way that we can. And the day that we do that is on the 19th of Kislev. So I know I just ran around in circles and just hopefully some of it was new for those who know the story. Hopefully those who weren't familiar, that now you have a little bit of a structure. But yeah, the days before Yud Kislev are a good day to prepare and to learn Hasidus and to take that day seriously. It's a Friday this year, right? Yeah, so Friday and Shabbos. So I'll see you more on Shabbos. We'll talk about it as well. Yossi, I'll leave it to him. My husband, he will talk to you and he'll bring to you about Yud Kislev. Yeah, we'll be with you. That's Friday night.
Friday night.
Yud is Thursday night, Friday, but because it goes into Chav, so then Shabbos is Chav. So we